That by itself dictates where to place cameras and actors and provides a framework to build the rest of the scene from. But just as often, the script says nothing, and if we don't invent some movement, the characters would be standing still. So continuing with initiative, one good motivation for movement is when a character gets excited or passionate about what he's saying. In this scene, a CEO of a huge company is trying to convince his board of directors to approve a merger, something he's very passionate about, which would be a good line to start moving on. So as he gives everybody a pep talk about how this would create one of the largest companies in the world and benefit all of them financially beyond belief, he walks. Another kind of initiative is when a character is curious or wants to find something out. In this scene, she is doing all the talking, but to make it more interesting, we've made the man go to a couple of places in the room to examine arbitrary things. Curiosity clearly motivates movement between the characters as well. After some regular dialogue, the man becomes interested in what the woman is saying, so we'll have him step forwards. The same move works equally well if he's asking a question. Initiative is also when a character makes the choice to change the direction of the scene. Here the man decides to end the conversation, so he begins walking, stopping one last time, then leaves completely. While it usually says in the script when a character leaves, it can be useful to start the process sooner and do it in several steps. Controller territory is about a character taking a dominant position by walking around a room like he owns it, just as animals mark their territory. Here the man in the suit is an unwelcome guest in the other character's territory, but as he walks calmly through the scene, he demonstrates his superiority by claiming freedom to move where he wants and stand where he wants. An effective use for this is to have a character step closer to another character the right moment in the dialogue to seem imposing or threatening. Here the man crosses a territorial boundary and invades her space. On a less overt level, we can use control to add drama or punch to a character's lines. Here the man makes an important speech, and by moving he takes control of the scene, but his purpose is to get everyone's attention and not necessarily to take over their territory. Discomfort is a big reason why people move in real life. When we're feeling uncomfortable, it's like something is gnawing at us, and we want to move to shake the feeling off, or at least avoid standing still. Here the woman is uncomfortable as she's waiting for the results of a job interview, so she moves to avoid feeling and to dissipate the energy. It's easiest to block if we plan to have the character move between a set number of stops instead of moving at random, so we don't have to set up an infinite number of cameras. Discomfort can bring subtle meaning to a conversation. Here the man and the woman are talking, and as he addresses something she may be lying about, she walks over here, which makes her discomfort quite clear. It's very common for people to cover up discomfort with movement that seems to have a purpose. In the shot from earlier, the man could just as well be pretending to be curious about objects in the room, but really be trying to hide his discomfort. Discomfort can also be positive. If a character is very excited or eager, he has a lot of bubbling energy he needs to expend somehow. Here the character has received terrific news, so he can't help but move. Becoming more personal is when a character moves closer to another character to become more intimate, more confidential, or more sincere. Here the man tries to convince his ex-wife that they should get back together, at least for the sake of the children. So as he becomes more personal and unguarded, he steps forwards. Becoming more personal usually means stepping closer, but it can simply mean making oneself visible to the other character. Here the man steps closer, but the woman turns away. So we'll have him walk over on the other side and into another shot. The woman turns back, and the man steps back into the previous shot again. A lot of scenes have one character trying to become more personal with the other, and designing the movement as a continuous attempt at this can bring action to a scene that doesn't automatically have any. Finally, becoming more private is the opposite. Here the character walks away, which can either mean some form of emotional withdrawal or rejection, or just a desire to be a little more private. A lot of character movement is really an alternating dance between becoming more personal and becoming more private. So moving between a couple of marks, it's fairly easy to create motivated and organized action as long as the dialogue calls for it. Equally useful is to look at why characters stop moving. Here we'll work with 5 reasons: stopping to end movement, stopping to think or feel, stopping to shift gears, stopping for clarity, and stopping for the camera. As with the reasons for movement, none of these exist in a vacuum and often overlap. Stopping to end movement seems very obvious, but what is meant by that is stopping when the motivations we looked at in the last chapter no longer exist. Here the blue woman is rushing to pack her bags to go see her boyfriend who's been working in a different country, so that would be highly motivated initiative. But the red woman knows that the boyfriend hasn't been faithful and finally breaks it to her. The blue woman slows to a halt, suddenly lacking purpose. Here the woman is moving away to become less personal because the man doesn't want to be open about something. As he begins opening up, she no longer has that reason and stops. Stopping to think or feel is interesting because as soon as something grabs our attention, we forget to move. Here the character is moving from point A to point B, but suddenly remembers something and stops to think. Seen like this, it's almost amusing because it shows how few things we're really able to do at the same time. A classic example of stopping to think is when a character leaves a dialogue. Here the man walks out, but suddenly thinks of something to say or changes his mind about something, so he stops as he considers. Here the woman leaves a conversation, but stops for a moment to feel and reflect on it. Again, as soon as her attention goes inwards into her emotional and mental world, she loses awareness of the physical world and forgets to move. Another example of stopping to feel is when 2 characters are walking and their dialogue suddenly becomes more sincere. So they stop in front of the camera for more personal dialogue. Stopping to shift gears is a momentary stop that happens as a prelude to another movement. If we continue with one of the previous examples, let's say the man hasn't had the courage to express his true feelings. But as he realizes that this may be his last chance, he stops to gather courage. Then turns around and begins to become more personal again. In this scene, the red man has been very overbearing. As he walks out, he's essentially becoming more private. But as one of the other characters yells an insult, he stops to shift gears, then turns around and walks closer to appear threatening, which is motivated by control or territory. We're really just doing 2 movements back to back, but inserting a little pause to break it up emphasizes the change more. In this scene, the woman is busy with legitimate purpose, so the movement is based on initiative. Suddenly, the man begins asking questions about something that makes her wonder if he knows a certain secret, so we want to switch to discomfort. The extra pause as we shift gears says it all. Stopping for clarity serves to emphasize and underline something. In the last chapter, the man brought extra attention and importance to what he was saying by moving. Stopping at just the right moment, the man suddenly becomes very direct, which brings particular focus to that line. The example from before where the women stop in front of the camera also brings clarity. As they stop, the scene becomes more focused and we pay new attention to what they're saying. The last motivation is deliberately stopping in front of the camera for the sole purpose of showing the character to us and deserves its own separate discussion. As the man walks in, he stops for a moment right in front of the camera for the only reason of giving us insight, then continues out of the frame. This is, of course, very easily stopping to think or feel. Here the woman leaves a dialogue and stops to reflect for a moment, but it's clear that the reason she's stopping here is that that's where the camera is. What it does is give us a unique perspective, and it allows us to know something about the character or to know that there's something we don't know, which in any case brings us deeper into the story. The great thing from a storytelling perspective is that we get to see something that no one else in the story gets to see. In a corny but effective example, a government building is under heavy security to protect against aliens disguised as humans. As a Secret Service agent walks past us, he stops, there's a red glow in his eyes, and we suddenly know something the characters don't, which does a great job at drawing us in. Last but not least is a simple reaction shot where a character stands for a moment at the end of a scene. Here the man has had a conversation with a woman, who then walks out. The simple fact that he stands for a moment turns it into a thinking or feeling shot, and there's no need to act it or be heavy-handed about it. A variation that's just as useful is to have him walk out after a moment of thinking or feeling. Again, the woman walks out. He stands for a moment, which adds instant depth, even if there's no particular motivation for it, and then walks out, clearing the frame. The only difference here is that ending on the reaction with no movement makes the character look a little more punched out. And ending with him walking out makes him look a little more active, so the thinking and feeling only last for a moment. At this point, let's stage a scene to try out the motivations from the last 2 chapters. This scene is between 2 attorneys, Jennifer and Damien, who used to be dating but are now just working together on a case. Damien's ego is having a hard time with the fact that Jennifer is seeing other people, but he's not the kind of person who admits defeat, even to himself. The script can be downloaded from hollywoodcamerawork.us/downloads.html. Let's do a read-through. Jennifer is busy looking for the deposition.
So, where do you go from here?
I get a subpoena to make them cough up, and I'll be back in court before hot pants in the morning.
Jennifer, are you sure you're... Never mind.
No, tell me.
Well, your fantasy.
You're still thinking about that. You know, you're not in it anymore, anyway.
That's not where I was going.
Where were you going?
Jennifer. Jen. Can I still call you Jen? The thing is, it's really great when a person has a healthy fantasy life and is really in touch with her or his dreams. You know, it shows depth.
$5 if you can spell that word.
But just so you know, I'm not judging you or anything.
Jennifer frowns and shakes her head.
Anyway, I'll be...
He turns and leaves.
It was nice to see him again, huh?
Who?
Mike.
Oh, him. He's, just a friend.
Oh, okay.
He leaves. There are plenty of subtle opportunities for motivated movement in this scene. To start, Jennifer's movement comes from a mixture of discomfort regarding the case and a desire to become less personal with Damien, who's being a bit obnoxious. In any case, she wants to stay busy, and the script also says that she's looking for a deposition, so the first thing we'll do is create a couple of marks she can move between. We'll put 2 marks at either end of the table, which will be the main marks. Halfway through the scene, Damien essentially says it's okay she once had a fantasy about him, which she finds mind-boggling, so we'll place a 3rd mark in the middle for becoming curious or more personal. We'll simply label the marks 1, 2, and 3. We'll place Damien here, which puts him almost in the middle of where Jennifer needs to walk, so he clearly doesn't care that she's busy. He only has 1 movement towards the end where he walks out, but stops to shift gears, so that's 2 marks. Next, let's cover the stops. We'll start with a camera on Jennifer with Damien in the background. For covering Jennifer's movement between marks 1 and 2, we can pan this camera to transform it into a flipped over the shoulder, which we'll cover in more detail later. We'll cover Jennifer's 3rd stop with a camera here, which we're placing like this to avoid a line problem, which we'll also look at later. Back on her 1st stop, let's also place an internal shot on Damien, which we can again pan to make work for Jennifer's 1st and 2nd marks. This camera is in her path, so she'll have to move behind the camera for that take, which is fine as long as his eye line is the same. Towards the middle of the scene, where Damien's long line shows that he's completely misunderstood the situation, this is the mark she'll walk to out of curiosity or becoming more personal. So let's add a close-up here. As the scene draws to a close, we'll have her walk back to the 1st mark, which is the best covered mark. This is where Damien walks out and stops to think or feel or shift gears. We'll cover that in the same close-up as before, but let's add a matching internal reverse on Jennifer. He walks out completely, and we hold on her as she stops to reflect for a moment, after which he walks out of the frame to stay active. So as we've covered these stops in 5 cameras, let's now work on the timing of movement between the marks. All we'll do here is note the movement between the numbered marks, which is an easy and intuitive way to time it to the melody of the script. In the beginning, we'll have Jennifer start on her mark 2 in the middle and walk to mark 1 during her line to immediately make her look busy. After a little dialogue, let's have her walk to mark 3, timing the walk to end here. As Damien does his long line, we'll have her listen for a bit and then walk to the middle mark. Here she'll stay for her next line and then walk back to mark 1 in time to frown and shake her head. Damien stands awkwardly for a moment, then walks out, which is between his 2 only marks. He stops and turns for a last line, after which he walks out of the room. Finally, we'll have Jennifer stand for a bit to think and feel, and then walk out of the shot to end the scene. With that laid down, let's shoot it and cut it together.
So, where do you go from here?
I get a subpoena to make them cough up, and I'll be back in court before hot pants in the morning.
Jennifer, are you sure you're... Never mind.
No, tell me.
Well, your fantasy.
You're still thinking about that. You're not in it. Anymore, anyway.
That's not where I was going.
Where were you going?
Jennifer. Jen. Can I still call you Jen? The thing is, it's really great when a person has a healthy fantasy life and is really in touch with her or his dreams. It shows depth.
$5 if you can spell that word.
But just so you know, I'm not judging you or anything. Anyway, I'll be... It was nice to see him again, huh?
Who?
Mike.
Oh, him. He's, just a friend.
Oh, okay.
In this chapter, we'll continue looking at reasons for character movement by looking at how the characters are facing each other. We could just leave this to the actors, but it very quickly becomes a blocking decision because it affects how we'll want to place cameras. Here we want the woman to appear reserved, but without turning away, there's really nothing else she can do with her performance to bring that across. If she turns away, we'll need a camera over here to really get the effect. So major body language is a blocking decision and therefore up to us. The problem is that many of us feel awkward setting up shots like this because it's very melodramatic. A melodrama is a drama with exaggerated emotions, and in real life, this kind of body language is clearly over the top, but in blocking, it's one of the most powerful means of expression. So the primary purpose of this chapter is to make it okay to be melodramatic and theatrical, because it's still the most effective way to show emotions. The way we'll look at the direction a character is facing is to see it as varying degrees of intimacy, honesty, and power. Starting with intimacy, the woman is facing the man, so she's being 100% intimate or open or available. As she turns a bit, she withdraws emotionally a little. And if she turns away, she's being completely closed and unavailable. This obviously works great if a character for whatever reason wants to be more private, but another benefit is that if we're outside the dialogue, she's still allowing us to be identified with her, which gives us personal and private insight. This is also great for making a character appear detached or arrogant. Throughout this scene, we'll place the man at a right angle to her, so he never lets her connect with him. This could be a rejection, but it also could be that he doesn't want to appear to care. If we cover this in over the shoulders, he's also standing sideways to us, so we get the same impression. But if we cover it in right-angle cameras, we're getting a completely personal view in one of the cameras, while he's still detached seen from her vantage point. Honesty is similar in that facing another character directly is the most revealing and makes it very hard to keep a secret. But as the man turns even just slightly, his body language shows us that he's less than truthful and therefore less willing to face her. Obviously, we're able to override our body language intentionally, but if we're not paying attention, dishonesty or insincerity will make us turn slightly away. As he turns away completely, he clearly has something to hide, but we're not making a judgment about what it is he's hiding, just that he is. So the body language is the same, whether he's hiding an evil scheme, hiding his true feelings, or is ashamed of something. Power is a little more complex because it can be used two opposite ways. The first is again that when a person is facing another head-on, the body language shows the most confidence and power. If the woman is a strong and dominant character, the man will tend to turn slightly to the side to show that he's not challenging her territory. So being direct equals being powerful, and being less direct is less powerful. But power is often created through manipulation by withdrawing intimacy, which creates the opposite body language. As the woman turns away from the man, she gets the upper hand by shutting him out, and he now has to give something up to regain the intimacy. This is a powerful ploy which people do in real life as well, though maybe not as explicitly. The only thing that makes this melodrama is exaggerating it, which tends to feel very natural on film. But if we simply don't like the melodramatic feeling, let's look at a couple of ways to get the same effect in a less overt way. The only really melodramatic shot is when a character is facing away completely. If the woman becomes sad and suddenly turns away, it can come across as very staged and remind us of an old Hollywood musical. One way to avoid this is to combine it with some stage business. So starting again at the top, something in the scene causes the woman to want to withdraw. Instead of just having her turn, we'll have her walk over to the table for a reason we don't even need to explain. We arrive in essentially the same shot, but it blends much better into the scene. Another way is starting a scene with a character facing away. Here the woman walks in, finding the man facing away. Since we're not seeing him turn, it doesn't call as much attention to itself and is a plausible way for him to happen to be standing. Finally, a thing to notice when characters aren't facing each other is that there's no need to worry about having one or both of them talk out into thin air. If we looked at this objectively, the man would actually have to talk louder to be heard. But from within the scene, their dialogue is connected through the story, which creates an intimate atmosphere even with distance between them, so they can both speak normally. Let's stage a quick scene to see what kind of subtle difference these distinctions bring to the blocking. The scene we'll do here is a very simple one between a father and a daughter. The father, John, has found out that his daughter, Amy, has lied about where she was today. We'll first shoot a version where we make no choices about which way the characters are facing, so let's skip the read-through and go straight to a cut.
The school called. They said you never came in.
What a bunch of liars. My ankle got twisted in gym and I was late for one class.
You seem to be doing fine now.
Did Mrs. Tweed call? How can you believe her over your own daughter?
You used to be such a nice little girl. I could always believe anything you told me. Now I don't know what to think. Amy, are you even paying attention?
Yeah, sure.
Why don't you feel you can tell me what's going on? I'm sure I can understand it, whatever it is.
Okay, Dad.
Come on, treasure, you can tell me.
I'm not your treasure, okay? I'm not your gem. I'm not your jewel, all right? And you don't understand anything, Dad.
If we did it like this, probably nobody would ever question it, but let's try to make it more expressive by working with the direction the characters are facing. Let's first work on John. If we start the scene with him facing away from Amy, it first of all means that he knows Amy is coming and he's been waiting for her, so he's much more prepared and in control of the situation. By facing away, he's also punishing her by withdrawing his intimacy. On the line, "You seem to be doing fine now," let's have him turn to face her head on. He's now being completely direct with her, and we're really going from one form of power to another. Next, we'll work on Amy. Throughout the scene, John is questioning whether or not she's telling the truth. So she'll not want to face him head on because that would be too revealing. But in the beginning of this scene, John is facing away from her, so she doesn't need to turn away in order to hide. When John turns directly towards her, let's have her pretend to be confident and honest by continuing to face him directly. But since she knows she's lying, let's have her gradually turn to the side to be less revealing. However, at the end, when John calls her a treasure, it's easy for her to be direct because it's the truth that she doesn't like that name. If we now set up the cameras as before and shoot 4 full takes, we can make all other choices in editing. So let's view the cut of this version.
The school called. They said you never came in.
What a bunch of liars. My ankle got twisted in gym and I was late for one class.
You seem to be doing fine now.
Did Mrs. Tweed call? How can you believe her over your own daughter?
You used to be such a nice little girl. I could always believe anything you told me. Now I don't know what to think. Amy, are you even paying attention?
Yeah, sure.
Why don't you feel you can tell me what's going on? I'm sure I can understand it, whatever it is.
Okay, Dad.
Come on, treasure, you can tell me.
I'm not your treasure, okay? I'm not your gem. I'm not your jewel, all right? And you don't understand anything, Dad.
Continuing now with how to cover stops, an inevitable consequence of moving characters is that the lines between them are moving as well. Sometimes this movement causes a line cross. Line crosses essentially happen when characters pass in front of or behind each other. If we're set up like this and the woman moves over here, there's no line cross. But the moment she passes behind the man, we're crossing the line. And if the man passes in front of her, we're again crossing the line. Anytime a main character passes in front of or behind another, we should have a red flag go up, not because line crossing is wrong, but because we have to be alert for the consequences of it. The consequence of a line cross is that it can easily cause any number of cameras to suddenly be on the wrong side of the line, and if we don't manage this carefully, we risk ending up with an uncuttable scene. Starting with a simple test situation, we've set up an over-the-shoulder pair. As the woman moves to a new stop, one of the cameras is now on the wrong side of the line. What determines which side we're on is which camera sees the movement. If we're in this camera she moves, that's the side we're on, and any new cameras need to go on the same side. If we're in this camera she moves, any new cameras need to go on this side instead. This is pretty straightforward when there's no line cross during the move itself, but when there is one, we suddenly have to be very careful about how we cut it. To look at that, let's create a third stop where the man has walked over here, and again add an over-the-shoulder pair. No matter which way we edit this, we're dealing with at least one line cross. Starting in this camera, we have a couple of choices, starting with cutting from here to here. As the man walks, we're almost immediately on the other side of the line. Let's pause here because we can't cut to the other reverse